I stepped out into my backyard, expecting the usual peaceful scene, my dog lazily napping under the tree, my hammock swaying in the breeze, and my carefully tended lawn stretching toward the fence. Instead, I was met with the deafening roar of heavy machinery. My heart stopped. A bulldozer was in the middle of my yard, tearing up the grass, and a group of workers were hammering stakes into the ground. My fence? Completely gone. My patio furniture? Tossed to the side like trash. For a second, I thought I had wandered into some kind of fever dream. This had to be a mistake. But before I could make sense of the chaos, a voice as sharp as nails cut through the air. "Oh, you're finally home. I was wondering when you'd come whining about this." I turned to see her. The bane of the neighborhood. The president of the HOA. Karen. Arms crossed, blonde bob as stiff as her personality, she smirked at me like she had just won the lottery. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Karen let out a patronizing sigh, flipping through a folder she was holding. "We had an emergency HOA vote, and the board decided to sell this land to a developer. The neighborhood needs funds, and your backyard was just so underutilized." My jaw nearly unhinged. "You sold my backyard?" "Technically, it belonged to the HOA all along," she said, waving a legal-looking document in my face. "It was just excess space behind your house, and, well, the community comes first. We all made sacrifices." I wanted to scream. I had lived in this house for 6 years. I mowed this lawn. I built the fire pit with my own hand. And now it was gone? I never agreed to this. "Oh, we sent a notice," Karen said with an exaggerated shrug. "Maybe you missed it?" The construction crew kept working as if I wasn't standing there, as if my rage was just background noise to them. I stormed toward the workers, but Karen stepped in front of me. "Don't even think about interfering," she snapped, her smugness replaced by cold authority. "This is all perfectly legal. You'll just embarrass yourself." I wanted to shove that stupid folder down her throat. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer. The next few hours were a blur of frustration and disbelief. My lawyer confirmed what I feared. The HOA couldn't just sell my property without my consent, but Karen had done something shady, voted without notifying me, faked some documents, and manipulated the board into believing they had control over my land. Fighting this in court would take months, maybe even years. Meanwhile, the developers wasted no time. Within days, my yard was unrecognizable. The peaceful retreat I had built was now a construction site, complete with dirt piles, cement mixers, and scaffolding. They were building luxury townhomes, on my backyard. I went door to door, talking to my neighbors. Almost all of them had been screwed by Karen in one way or another. She fined people for nonsense reasons. Lawn gnomes, mailbox colors, even the direction someone parked their car. Everyone hated her, but no one dared to challenge her. "She has the HOA in her pocket," one neighbor told me. Last time someone fought her, she doubled their fines until they moved. Karen was a dictator in yoga pants. I couldn't let this slide. If legal action was a slow crawl, I needed to think faster. My first instinct was to be a nuisance. I filed every possible complaint against the construction. Noise violations, safety hazards, environmental concerns. I parked my car right where their delivery trucks needed to be, forcing them to work around me. I made friends with the local raccoons and left food near their equipment. Soon, the site was swarming with wildlife. But Karen? She was thriving in the chaos. She held HOA meetings just to gloat about the progress, taking credit for bringing in new revenue. Then, one night, while drowning my sorrows in a deep dive of legal documents, I found it. The loophole. The HOA's power over properties had a fatal weakness. They needed unanimous homeowner consent to sell any privately owned land. And guess what? I never consented. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted Karen the next morning, catching her mid-strut as she inspected the construction site like some kind of evil overlord. "You stole my backyard," I said, holding up my own stack of papers, and you did it illegally. Karen's smirk faltered for half a second before returning with full force. You can't afford a lawsuit against the HOA, she said, crossing her arms. And even if you win, the construction is already happening. Too late. She turned to walk away, but I wasn't done. Actually, it's not too late, I said, stepping closer. Because you know what happens when something is built illegally on my property? She turned back, eyebrow raised. I grinned. I get to tear it all down. Her face went pale. That night, I made a few calls. A friend of a friend happened to own a demolition company. When I explained the situation, he didn't just agree to help. He offered a discount because, as it turned out, Karen had once fined his aunt for having a bird feeder. The next morning, the demolition crew arrived. It started with a bulldozer rolling into the half-built framework of the first townhome. The construction workers barely had time to react before the walls came crashing down. A backhoe moved in, ripping up the foundation like it was nothing. Karen arrived mid-demolition, shrieking at the top of her lungs. Stop this. Stop right now. I casually leaned against my car, sipping my coffee. Sorry, Karen. Turns out this was never your land to sell. She stormed up to me, shaking with rage. I will sue you for this. You're going to pay for this. No, Karen, I said, stepping closer, enjoying the way her fury turned into something closer to panic. You're going to pay for everything. Behind me, the demolition crew continued their work. The sound of Karen's dreams crumbling was the most beautiful noise I had ever heard. And this was just the beginning. The moment the first wall of the half-built townhome crumbled under the force of the bulldozer, I knew I had hit Karen where it hurt. The look on her face was priceless. Wide-eyed, mouth open, hands clutching the air like she could somehow stop the inevitable destruction of her precious project. The construction workers scrambled in confusion, unsure if they should intervene or just watch the chaos unfold. Some of them, I swear, looked relieved. Karen, however, was not taking this well. She charged at me, practically vibrating with rage, her high-pitched screech cutting through the air. You have no right to do this, she screamed, her voice cracking. I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled. Actually, I have every right. This is my land, remember? She shoved a shaking finger in my face. I will have you arrested. You think you can just destroy a legal project? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the emails from my lawyer, and held it up for her to see. Not only can I, but I'm legally required to. Since the HOA never had the right to sell my property, anything built on it is considered an unauthorized structure. And you know what that means? Immediate removal. She snatched the phone from my hand, skimmed through the messages, and her face turned a terrifying shade of red. For a moment, I thought she might actually explode. Instead, she threw my phone back at me and let out a shriek that sounded like a malfunctioning car alarm. You think you've won? She snarled, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. Oh, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I gave her a mock sympathetic shrug. Karen, I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And that's why this is so much fun. She spun around, fumbling for her phone, probably calling whatever minions she still had in her pocket. Meanwhile, the demolition crew continued their work, completely unfazed by the meltdown happening a few feet away. Every crack, every crash, every falling beam felt like justice. That night, after the dust had settled and the illegal townhomes were nothing more than piles of rubble, I celebrated. My backyard was a mess, but it was my mess again. I invited a few neighbors over for a bonfire, and for the first time in years, people weren't afraid to talk about how much they hated the HOA. She fined me $300 for having an unapproved shade of blue on my door, one neighbor grumbled. She made me remove my kid's trampoline because it wasn't in harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic, another added. She once knocked on my door and told me my Christmas decorations were too festive. I leaned back in my chair, watching the fire crackle. Sounds like we should start thinking about getting rid of her for good. The idea spread like wildfire. Within a few days, an entire movement had started. Flyers circulated, petitions appeared, and even the quietest neighbors suddenly had a reason to speak up. Karen, of course, fought back. One morning, I walked outside to find a massive sign planted in my front yard that read, HOA violation, illegal structure demolition, fines pending. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. She was desperate. She knew she was losing. That's when the real fun began. I doubled down on my antics. I filed so many complaints against the HOA that the city inspector started personally stopping by Karen's house. I made sure the neighborhood held an emergency vote. This time, one Karen wasn't invited to. And when she inevitably tried to intimidate me, I turned the tables on her. One morning, she stormed up to my house, banging on the door so hard I was worried she'd actually break it down. "This is harassment," she screeched the second I opened it. "You and your little friends are spreading misinformation about me, and I will not stand for it." I crossed my arms. "Misinformation? Karen, everything we've said is true." She stomped her foot. "You do not get to decide how this neighborhood is run. I have dedicated years to maintaining the standards of this community, and I will not let some bitter little man destroy everything I've built." I gave her the smuggest grin I could muster. "Karen, everything you've built is already destroyed. Literally. You watched it happen." She inhaled sharply, her nostrils flaring so wide I thought she might suck in the entire street. "I am going to sue you for defamation," she hissed. "Go for it," I said. "I'll just countersue for all the shady fines you've been issuing illegally. I'm sure the city would love to look at your financial records." For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. That's when I knew. She wasn't just mad about the townhomes. She was terrified that someone would start digging into her real scams. That night, I did a little more research. I went through public records, old HOA meetings, even dug up some complaints from past homeowners who had mysteriously moved away. And what I found? Karen wasn't just running an overbearing HOA. She was running a full-blown racket. She had been quietly pocketing thousands in made-up fines, fake maintenance fees, unauthorized HOA dues that only ever seemed to go into her personal account. She had been running a scam for years, and no one had ever questioned it because they were too afraid of her. I, however, had nothing to lose. The next morning, I made sure every single homeowner in the neighborhood received an anonymous email containing everything I had found: bank statements, fake invoices, records of fines that had never gone toward any real community improvement. Karen must have found out about it within minutes, because suddenly, my phone was blowing up with calls from unknown numbers. Then came the emails, the frantic messages, the threat. Then, finally, the desperate plea. A single text from Karen, short and to the point. "Let's talk." I stared at the screen and smiled. "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what's coming next." I stared at Karen's text message, letting the words sink in. Let's talk. Just a few days ago, she had been on top of the world, controlling the neighborhood like some kind of suburban overlord. Now, she was grasping at straws, realizing her empire was crumbling beneath her perfectly manicured feet. I could have ignored her, let her stew in her own desperation, but something about the idea of watching her squirm in real time was too tempting to pass up. So I agreed to meet. Not in some formal setting, not in her HOA office where she could hide behind paperwork and fake authority. No, I told her to meet me at the local coffee shop. Neutral ground, no power plays, just her and me. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting stiffly at a table in the corner, her fingers gripping her coffee cup so tightly I thought she might shatter it. The moment she saw me, she forced a smile, but her eyes gave her away. She was rattled. "I assume you know why I called you here," she said, her voice strained, as if she was trying to keep herself from screaming in public. I leaned back in my chair, casually sipping my drink. "Oh, I have a pretty good idea. I'd love to hear you say it, though." She inhaled sharply through her nose, nostrils flaring. Look, things may have gotten out of hand, but there's no need to take this any further. We can come to an agreement." I raised an eyebrow. "An agreement?" "Yes." She nodded quickly, leaning in like she was about to offer me some life-changing deal. "I'll drop all fines, erase any HOA violations against you, and even reimburse you for the misunderstanding with your backyard. In return, you stop this little crusade of yours." I almost laughed. "A misunderstanding? You sold my land to a developer and tried to bury me in fake fines. That's not a misunderstanding, Karen, that's fraud." Her jaw clenched. "Fine. Call it what you want. The point is, you got what you wanted. You tore down the development, you embarrassed me, congratulations. But this? Digging into my finances, spreading lies, this is harassment, and I won't stand for it." I leaned forward, my voice dropping just enough to make sure she knew I wasn't bluffing. "Oh, it's not harassment, Karen. It's accountability. Something you've managed to avoid for years." Her face twitched. For a second, I thought she might lunge across the table and strangle me, but she held herself back. "You have no idea what you're messing with," she hissed. "I have connections. Powerful ones. People who can make your life a living hell." I grinned. "Oh, you mean like the developer you scammed? The one who's now suing the HOA for damages? Because from what I hear, he's not very happy with you either." Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She knew I was right. I stood up, grabbing my coffee. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Karen. It might be one of the last peaceful ones you have for a while." The next few days were absolute chaos for her. The lawsuit from the developer hit the HOA like a freight train. On top of that, multiple homeowners filed complaints with the city, demanding an investigation into the HOA's finances. Once the authorities started poking around, things unraveled fast. It turned out Karen had been embezzling HOA funds for years. She had created fake maintenance projects, overcharged for community upgrades that never happened, and funneled the money straight into her own pocket. And now, with all eyes on her, there was nowhere left to hide. The final nail in her coffin came during the next HOA meeting. The entire neighborhood showed up, and for the first time, she wasn't in control. The anger in the room was palpable. People she had terrorized for years stood up one by one, listing every scam, every unnecessary fine, every power trip she had pulled. And when the vote came, unanimous, Karen was officially removed as HOA president. She didn't take it well. She stormed out of the meeting, screaming about how she was going to sue everyone, how we were all ungrateful little nobodies, and how the neighborhood was going to fall apart without her leadership. No one cared. No one stopped her. Over the next few weeks, things kept getting worse for her. The city fined her for illegal financial activities, the HOA board dissolved under legal pressure, and eventually, the lawsuits piled up so high that Karen did the one thing I never thought I'd see. She put her house up for sale. The day the moving trucks arrived was glorious. Neighbors came out onto their lawns, watching as Karen angrily barked orders at the movers, shoving boxes into the truck like she was personally offended by the process. She looked miserable, like a dethroned queen forced to live among peasants. As she climbed into her car, she spotted me standing in my reclaimed backyard, holding a beer, watching the spectacle unfold. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought she might say something. Maybe one last threat, one last attempt to claw back some dignity. But she didn't. She just slammed the car door and sped off, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of her failed reign. With Karen gone, the neighborhood changed almost overnight. People started putting up decorations again without fear of getting fined. Kids rode bikes in the streets without Karen screaming about unsightly activity. We even held a massive block party, something Karen had banned years ago for being too disruptive. And me? I finally got my backyard back. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As I sat by the fire pit that night, surrounded by neighbors who were finally free from her tyranny, I couldn't help but raise my drink. to never dealing with an HOA Karen again. Laughter erupted around me, glasses clinked, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like home again.